And we are back on the build phase. I'm Mr. Ben, and today we're going to be talking about another Dice Throne hero. Up on the block today for in-depth review and analysis is the spirit of Christmas himself, Santa Claus. So if you're watching this during the seasonally appropriate time of year, Merry Christmas to you. If you're watching this during like most of the other times of year, how about a Merry Unchristmas to you? Before we get into the details of this hero, I do like to do a little bit of housekeeping at the top of this video. First of all, I'm going to be approaching this with a competitive mindset. I'm trying to think of if I want to win the most games against players who are also trying to win the most games, how am I going to pilot Santa Claus? If that's not your mindset, if the way you engage with Dice Throne is you play at the kitchen table with your kids or your friends, and that's a little too hardcore for you, that is perfectly acceptable. I hope there's still some things of value in this video, but take as much as you want and ignore the stuff that doesn't apply to you. Similarly, even if you are a try-hard, sweaty tournament player like I am, where you really like to think about min-maxing and doing the absolute best you can with these heroes, just because something appeals to my play style or something works for me doesn't mean it's the only way to pilot these heroes. Now, I will talk about flexibility a lot of times in these videos and how different situations demand different things from the heroes, but at the end of the day, there is going to be some personal bias shot through all of this. So, with the caveat that all types of players are welcome here, and the further caveat that competitive players who don't play the same way that I do are also welcome here, and I hope there's something of value in the video for everybody across that spectrum. I just want to make it clear that both my bias and perspective are going to be very much on display in this video. I'm going to be describing the best way that I think someone should play Santa, but that doesn't mean your way of playing Santa is wrong. And if you disagree with something I say, let me know in the comments below. Maybe I can learn something from you. Okay, with all of that out of the way, let's get into the actual Dice Throne analysis here. And let's start with the character's pamphlet. Now, Santa is a low complexity character, kind of appropriate. You buy a holiday gift box, it makes sense that the craziest, most difficult character isn't going to be the marquee name on a holiday gift box. So Santa has kind of a straightforward approach. Now, I guess before I tackle actual Santa Claus, I do want to shout out into the deep lore of Dice Throne. The real ones who have been here for a long time are aware that this is actually Santa version 2, because the original Santa was a print and play version of him that was just the barbarian. It was just the barbarian. It was like a reskin of the barbarian with the theming of Santa Claus. So I'm not going to go over that today. I've already done a video about the barbarian. Uh, you can go watch that one and just pretend it's about Santa Claus if the information you're looking for is the print and play version of Santa. This is Santa from the 2-pack with Krampus. Okay, so let's take a look at his status effects here. He's only got 2 of them, and he's got the 3-2-1 die face, the most friendly die face in the game, the 3-2-1. So let's zoom a little closer into this pamphlet and take a look at what these tokens do. Starting with cheer. Now this token has a 3 stack limit, and you can spend it to do a couple different things. You can spend one of them to re-roll one of your die at any time, and you can spend 3 of them to change one of your dice to a 6. Now, both of these both of these modes are useful in different situations. I tend to like to stockpile cheer and get the free 6-it and get the known outcome. The type of player that I am, I tend to be fairly conservative. I tend to go for things when I know I'm going to get it, and I don't just trust in the spirit of the card or the heart of the cards. Sorry, Yu-Gi-Oh players. I don't just trust in the heart of the cards or the luck of the dice. I try to mitigate my luck as much as possible. Now, if you're more of a YOLO, let's see what the dice have for me player, you're probably going to find yourself spending cheer as in ones here and there. And I will admit that the stockpile approach, my approach of trying to always get 3 cheer so that I can make sure when I spend the cheer I know what I'm getting, does leave you more vulnerable to status removal. So somebody who's trying to spend through those cheers as quickly as possible, you're never going to get blown out with a big what status effects in the same way that I would when I'm trying to stockpile cheer. I tend to like to let it build up and go for that guaranteed 6-it. Plus, we'll get into that when we get to Santa's board. All right, so to move down to eggnog. So this is another positive status effect. It has a stack limit of 5, and you can spend 3 of them. So they don't do anything by themselves, but you can spend 3 of them to do one of three things based on a die roll. So when you spend three, you roll a die. If you get the axe, which is the three die face, you deal two undefendable isolated damage to an opponent. In 1v1, obviously, you don't choose an opponent, but it does have the extra utility there. If you're playing multiplayer, you can choose where this damage is directed. You could also heal and gain one, and then you have about a 15% chance to heal two and draw a card. So out of these, generally speaking, healing two and drawing a card is going to be a lot more valuable than healing two and gaining a combat point. But I kind of like the damage. A lot of times, I like just putting a little bit of extra damage out there with the eggnogs. All right, so that's really all there is to Santa's pamphlet. There's not a lot going on in terms of status effects with this hero, so let's go ahead and take a look at Santa's overall board. So I say some version of this every time we take a look at the entirety of one of these dashboards, but it's always correct. They're always gorgeous. Manny always knocks it out of the park on the art, and the kind of graphic layout of the ability dashboard, I think, is one of the things Dice Throne does just maybe better than any other game. And obviously Santa is no exception to that. So let's put away the full board here and let's zoom in and start looking at Santa's abilities. So we're going to start with Santa's basic attack. This is basic attacks are basic attacks for basically every hero. This is a 4, 6, 8, depending upon the number of axes you have. I do like seeing an 8 on a basic attack, that 7 being kind of the average damage output number that I keep in my mind. Anytime I see an attack that can get above 7, I like that. That's better. But being 4 on the worst version of this is pretty weak. So it goes a little harder, it goes a little higher in value than some basics, but it also goes a little lower in value than some other basics. So do you want to roll for this? No, of course not. But the chances are you are at some point during the game going to have to take that, and I will get more into the reasons why as we talk about some of Santa's other powers. Now, once this is upgraded, it becomes a 5/7/9. Now, 9 attack on a basic feels pretty good, but you do have to get all axes to trigger that, and then of course you need 4 of a kind to get the eggnog. Generally speaking, anytime an ability requires 4 of a kind, I sort of delete that from my mind because you so rarely get it. And if what you're trying to do is get a 9 damage basic attack, you really can't be using your rerolls trying to chase that 4 of a kind. You can't give up going from 9 damage down to 7 damage because you had 3 ones and you re-rolled the 3 that you had to try to get another 1, and oh, now instead it's a 5, so you actually weakened your core attack. You can't do that. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but I would strongly advise you against doing that. The main purpose of your basic attack is going to be putting damage across the board. Chasing the 4 of a kind for that eggnog is not going to be worth it. Just the risks are too great. The risks are too high. So I'm not a big fan of this upgrade. Even though you might end up on basic attack more often than you would think with Santa Claus, this is an upgrade that I feel pretty comfortable selling. Maybe if there's nothing else in your hand and you have a surplus of combat points, possibly you could put this down in the early game, but even then, what are you going to draw next turn? Are you going to have the ability to pay for it? This is not an upgrade that and I will admit, having a damage number of 9 on a basic attack does feel somewhat tempting, but at 2 combat points and with a 4 of a kind bonus ability that's essentially never going to trigger in most games, I just don't see this upgrade being worth it. All right, let's move down to Fireside Chat. So, after targeting an opponent, you each roll a d6, so there's kind of a dual mechanic here. If your roll is equal or greater, I like having the equal in the base ability. When we've seen this in other heroes like Gunslinger, the equal goes to the opponent in the base ability, and you have to upgrade to get that. So I like that Santa wins equal or greater. You do 6 undefendable damage and gain a cheer. Otherwise, you do 8 damage and gain an eggnog. You take it if you get it. This is not an ability I'm chasing. This is not an ability I'm crazy about. But 6 undefendable damage is a pretty good number. Gaining cheer potentially sets you up to have a little more control over your future rolls. So I don't feel bad firing this ability off, particularly if it's an opponent who has like a really annoying or obnoxious defense. Like if I'm going to crash into a pyromancer for 8 damage and they deal 4 back to me. I kind of rather do the 6 undefendable. So this is an okay ability. It's not something that I chase on his board, but ending up with 4 bells is definitely something that's going to happen sometimes. I find myself activating this like maybe once per game, but again, I'm never really chasing it. There's no upgrade for Fireside Chat, so we're going to move right along to Festivities. And this is one of the first abilities where I want to circle back to how Santa sometimes falls into activating basics more often than other heroes. So, Festivities is gain 2 eggnog, everybody gains a combat point, and deal 7 plus 1 damage per player. You yourself are a player. I have misplayed this ability so many times. I know what the right rule is, and I still have had a bunch of times where I go, okay, 7 plus 1 for my opponent, 8 incoming damage. I am also a player, so it's actually 9. So this is a 9 attack in a regular 1v1 game. Obviously, if you get into like 2v2 or higher player counts, this ability can get pretty nutty pretty quickly. I'm not crazy about giving combat points to my opponent. There's going to be some games where that does not matter at all, and there's going to be other games where you're essentially funding your own demise. That's not a great feeling. And for 9 damage, man, that just doesn't feel like enough damage to justify giving your opponent resources. Now, if you have one existing eggnog and you spend those 3 and you get 2 more, well, now we're talking about 11 damage. The 2 damage from the eggnog plus the 9, assuming their defense can't soak any of it. 11 damage for a combat point. That feels a little bit more even, but a combat point can be a lot of things. If the difference between them playing so wild or not is 1 combat point, and you fed that to them, and now they're ulting on you because of it, that feels bad. So, you got to be careful with this power. I think Festivities is actually a decent power, and you will end up on this when you're chasing. Well, we'll get to naughty or nice here in a second. You are going to end up on this kind of the same way that you end up on your basic attack more often than you'd think. But I'll get to the specifics of that when we talk about the next ability. First, though, I want to look at the upgrade for Festivities. This gives you 3 eggnog immediately, which means you can pop off and either heal for 2 or deal 2 damage. So that basically just adds a health swing of 2, however you slice it. It increases the gap, the delta, I guess the math nerds would say, on this ability. It costs 2 combat points, and everybody gains a combat point still, and the damage goes up from 8 plus 1 per player, so we're looking at, or from 7 to 8. So we're looking at 10 damage plus either 2 healing or 2 more damage. So we're looking at essentially 12 functional points of health impact on the game, plus a combat point. And given the play pattern around Santa, especially early game, this is an upgrade that I have seen work. It's not my favorite. This isn't my favorite power, but part of the way I play Santa causes me to stumble into Festivities frequently enough, and this is impactful enough that I can justify playing this upgrade. I'm not crazy about it, but I can justify playing this upgrade, and I think there's a good case to be made that uh, Festivities punches above its weight because of its relationship to the next power we're going to talk about. All right, and that next power is naughty or nice. So, 2 axes, 2 bells, and a 6. After you target your opponent, you roll a d6. On 1 to 4, the opponent is nice. They gain a combat point. Always given presents, the Santa Claus, and 10 damage. On a 5 or 6, your opponent is naughty. They gain a cheer, and you deal 12 damage instead. This whole power is ult damage numbers. Now it's defendable. It's not, an ult says 10 and you're getting that guaranteed 10 through. You're not guaranteed to get that 10 through with naughty or nice. But 10 or 12. 12 damage on a base power is bananas. Now that 12 is locked behind a second layer of variance in that you have to roll for this ability, which is not the easiest to roll for. And then you have to essentially win the rider roll with a 5 or a 6. So you've got like a 1/3 chance of 12 and a 2/3 chance of the 10. But this power is strong. This power is very strong. If he could, Santa would use this ability every single turn. And this kind of gets me back to what I mentioned with the basic attack and kind of Fireside Chat and kind of Festivities. These are all powers. We need 2 axes, 2 bells, and a 6. Over here, we need 4 bells. Up here, we need 2 6s and 3 axes. Over here, it's all axes. So all 4 of these abilities that we've talked about so far kind of feed into chasing naughty or nice. If you're going for naughty or nice and you can't quite get there and you've got 1 roll left, you can pivot to any one of these other abilities. Pivoting into a basic attack because you can't get the bells and the 6 is something that you end up having to do. So this does slightly push up the value of Santa's basic attack beyond that of where some other heroes would be. That said, I don't want the basic. I don't want the festivities. I don't want the fireside chat. I want the naughty or nice, and I want the naughty or nice as many times as I can throughout the course of this game. Once we upgrade this, which costs 2 combat points, it becomes a 1 to 3, and then they're nice for 11 damage, or 4 to 6, and they're naughty for 13 damage. 13 damage is such a big number for an ability that's not an ultimate. It's crazy. I feel like this is an upgrade. If you see it, you play it. Obviously, if it's like late enough in the game that there's like no game left, there's only 1 turn or something, maybe you don't play it in that situation. But by and large, this is Santa's ability. If you're playing Santa, you're playing him because you want to do naughty or nice. If you're playing Shadow Thief, you want to do an Insidious Strike for 1 million damage because you've got 1 million coins in your coin purse. If you're playing Santa, you want to do naughty or nice. You want your opponent to be naughty, and you want to crack him for 13 damage over and over again over the course of the game. This is an upgrade that is almost an autoplay in almost every situation. Very, very strong on already an ability that's very, very strong. Uh, this ability by itself is probably why I play Santa. When I play Santa, this is why. Okay, moving on to Rosy Cheeks. Now, I do want to point out that the theme of pivoting and flexibility is still prevalent here. If you're chasing naughty or nice, you're looking at 2 dice that are a 1 through 3 and 2 dice that are a 4 or 5 and a 6, which is kind of like looking for a straight. So I say this with all heroes, but with Santa in particular, because his game plan is so linear, he's going to get more small straights. Like you just luck into small, no matter who you're playing, you luck into small straights. It's the thing that happens. Santa is kind of always chasing a small straight adjacent power, and as such, he's going to end up on small straights maybe slightly more often than your typical hero just kind of fumbles their way into small straights. So what does he get for his small straight? He gains a cheer and then does 6 plus 1 per cheer. So essentially a guaranteed 7 unless your opponent uses a bye in between you activating this ability and damage being dealt. And if you use your bye on a single cheer to try to save a single point of damage, please, thank you. If your opponent does that, they're doing you a favor. That is not a very effective use of resources. But you've got a base attack here of 7 damage. If you already have a couple cheers on you, this could be as much as 9 damage off of a small straight. This is more than reasonable. 9 damage off a small straight is a higher number than we tend to see. It does require a little bit of setup, and of course straights are the most like dice manipulation card vulnerable ability you can activate. A large straight is probably the most vulnerable ability in the entire game. A small straight's a little better, but that's kind of why we practice good roll hygiene. You know, if we have a small straight on roll 2, maybe we give up on the naughty or nice this turn. We take the small straight, we deal our 9 damage with our Rosy Cheeks, and move on. Presenting a straight with no rerolls remaining is, I feel like, the most precarious and dangerous kind of attack to present to somebody, because if they can helping hand it, if they can tip, there's so many ways you can mess up a straight. Even if I have an ultimate, oh, you helping hand my ultimate and I don't have no, okay, I'll fall back on a mini ult. I don't feel that bad about that. A straight, you can really end up having nothing if you present it when you have no fallback options. Okay, enough general conversation about straights. What does the upgrade for Rosy Cheeks do? You gain a cheer and an eggnog, and your damage goes up to a base 8. And if you have the full cheer, you get up to 10. That's just a crazy number on a small straight. That is such a big number, a damage number on a small straight. 10 damage, again, it requires some setup. And if the eggnog gets you to eggnog stack, that's another potential stream of damage or healing, which increases the kind of delta that this puts you on. This is a pretty solid small straight. Do you chase small straights? Do I prefer a small straight to a nutty or nice? No, of course not. But if you get it, this is not an ability you feel bad about falling back on at all. The upgrade, maybe early game, like first few turns. If I don't have anywhere else to out my combat points, I could see myself paying this. But since this is an ability I'm really chasing to begin with, if we're talking like turn 4 and I have to make some hard choices about the So Wild, the the helping hand, like these kinds of cards in my hand, and I have this thing's getting sold to make sure I can pay for that So Wild, pay for that not this time. Those are going to be more impactful deeper in the game, but early game, this is not a bad upgrade. Okay, so then we're going to move from Rosy Cheeks down to the large straight Reindeer Games. Uh, you gain a cheer and 2 eggnog, and then deal 4 damage plus 1 damage per eggnog and 1 damage per cheer. So if you're at max stack on both, you've got 5 nogs, 3 cheer, and 12 damage on your large straight. Now that requires a pretty fair amount of setup to have all those status effects just sitting there. I will say I stockpile cheer anyway. I am generally trying to get to a 3 stack of cheer and then out them to get myself to a naughty or nice, or push myself to get a 6 when I need it. Maybe even sometimes the festivities if the dice are being particularly ornery. I'm already doing the play pattern that makes reindeer games better. Nog, I spend it as soon as I get 3 every single time. Like I what status effects is such a blowout if you've got like a Nog stack and a cheer stack and your opponent, what status of it like, ooh, we don't want that to happen. So Nog I'm less likely to have a stockpile of, but this ability gives you 2 to begin with. So by default, this is a 7 damage ability, and it can get up to 12, which is just nuts if you have all the pieces line up for that setup. That said, I already mentioned in this video how large straights are much more susceptible to dice manipulation cards than basically any other ability you can present. So you're not going to see the large straight as often. The small straight sometimes just, I mean, sometimes you throw the dice and you just have a large straight on roll 1. When I'm going, if I have a small straight on roll 1 and I roll 2 and I don't get the large straight, if I'm playing competitively, I present a small straight and I move on. And if my opponent lets me, I just lose that third reroll. But I never want to be in the position where I have no rerolls left, I have no cards in hand, I'm presenting a straight. All they need to have is tip it. All they need to have is helping hand. There's a bunch of like cheap ways for an opponent to mess up a straight. So while the damage numbers can be tempting, uh, large straights are not something I'm going to chase on Santa Claus. Not ever. To upgrade this, it costs 2. He gains a cheer and 2 eggnog, so that stays the same. The damage is 4 still, plus 1 per eggnog, and then 2 damage per cheer. So this goes up to, what is that? 5 eggnog would be 5 damage, 2 damage per cheer would be another 6. So that's 11 plus up to 15. So max damage on this becomes 15. That's a crazy big number. Uh, Also, he gains mistletoe. 2 chosen players can gain cheer. You would probably choose yourself twice, and 2 undefendable damage. Not great. Better than a whiff, but not great. I just don't think you can justify buying this upgrade. This is not a character you want to chase straights with. If I'm going to be investing my dice fix cards to try to push myself into a power, it's going to be an ultimate. It's going to be a naughty or nice. Um, yes, the large straight can ultimately end up doing more damage numbers than a naughty or nice if all the stars of setup align. It just feels like a trap to me. Large straights are not something I'm chasing after on Santa Claus. I'll end up there sometimes. I fully admit the symbols on the dice will look very similar to a naughty or nice when you have a large straight. And if I have the choice between the two, I'm pretty much always going to do naughty or nice because I'm not buying this upgrade. I'm not buying this upgrade. It does get to a high damage number. I have to concede that. But I think I would my resources are going to be better spent going after guaranteeing that I can get that naughty or nice than hoping I can get large straights or even worse, trying to force large straights with Santa. So, not an upgrade I'm likely to play, not because it's bad, but because reindeer games as an ability is not something I'm likely to chase with Santa Claus. And how many times would you have to activate this large straight to make it worth it? 2, 3? How many times in a game are you setting up all that eggnog and all that cheer to be able to get that max damage. So in Rainbow Unicorn Land, where this thing goes off twice at 15 damage each, that looks great. That's just not what tends to happen against a resisting opponent. So, not an upgrade I'm likely to play. All right, moving on. Holly Jolly. This is going to require 4/6s like all mini alts do. Gain 2 cheer, gain 3 eggnog, and 6 undefendable damage. I already talked on Fireside Chat about how 6 undefendable damage is a pretty respectable damage number, particularly if you take into account your opponent's defense being something like mean, that's going to do a bunch of damage to you back. The cheer is good. The eggnog lets you fire off right away, so you can kind of add 2 more damage to that undefendable. You have a 50-50 of getting 8 undefendable damage with that eggnog, or doing the 6, and then healing 2 plus gaining a combat point or drawing a card. If you get this, you'll take it. Do you chase this? No, you chase the ultimate and you end up here because your opponent used Helping Hand or Tip It or something. But this is a perfectly respectable mini alt. To upgrade it, you get 3 cheer and 3 eggnog, so you immediately are refreshed with the ability to like pull another 6 out of the cheer bag and fire your eggnog off. So 7 undefendable damage. That's going to likely have a total impact on the game more like 9 because you got the 3 eggnog right there. And then Tannenbaum, gain a cheer and 5 eggnog. Micro ults are kind of always bad, and this one is no exception. Gosh, I mean, I guess you take Tannenbaum before you say whiff, but you don't feel good about it. 1 cheer and 5 nog. You're probably gonna. I mean, you fire off the nog right away, so you're gonna at least do 2 damage or heal 2. So it's not like a completely like neutral move. Some set of abilities are totally neutral. They make no impact on health values at all. This one will allow you to slightly massage a health value one way or the other, but not great. Not an upgrade I'm going to play. Not an ability I'm going to chase. I do think you can get away with chasing 6s with Santa a little more than some other heroes because he has that cheer. He has that built-in ability to kind of go towards 6s a little bit more. But I would rather use my resources to guarantee like back-to-back turns of naughty or nice than use multiple resources to force 2 extra 6s now for Holly Jolly. Then what do I do next turn? Be at the mercy of the dice? The dice hate me, man. So this is an upgrade I'm probably going to sell in basically every game. All right, finally, moving down to Santa's defense ability, Eggnoggin' It. Notice how, I guess the thing to notice first is what this defense ability doesn't do. This defense ability doesn't deal any damage back. So this is not a hero that can pull a draw from the jaws of defeat the way some other heroes can. This is also not a hero that soaks any damage whatsoever with their defense abilities. So if you roll all bells, you could gain 4 eggnog and potentially fire them off right away. So the best thing Santa can do as far as impacting the damage he's taking is get enough eggnog to either heal for 2 or deal 2 damage back. So that would be the scenario under which he could force a draw or maybe heal himself out of kill range. But something about something about all of these like dueling games, if your opponent knows they have lethal and they know you can't get out of it, it's a scary place to be. It's a scary place to be when your opponent goes, okay, these 3 abilities on my dashboard, if I get any one of these 3, that's enough damage to kill you, and you can't stop me because unless you roll 3 eggnogs, you can't stop me. This is not a defense I'm crazy about. I mean, it produces some value for him. It's better than not having a defense, but it's rough. At the upgraded version, he slightly increases his ability to gain eggnog. The cheer thing remains an on. I don't think you can pay for this defense upgrade. So with a lot of heroes, there is a line of logic that exists in the community where your defense is going to be used every single turn. Like your opponent's going to attack you every turn. Your defense therefore gets used every turn. Not looking at you, Ninja, but for normal heroes that attack with defendable damage. Therefore, defense upgrades produce more value than attack upgrades because you're using your defense constantly. There's some truth to that, but this is a defense that is not worth upgrading. Yeah, while Santa does have the ability to gain extra combat points through his eggnog rolls, and he has less pressure on his existing combat points through cheer being able to act as like a pseudo six it or a pseudo try again. These abilities take pressure off of Santa's economy, but I'm not investing 2 combat points in one extra die that might gain me an eggnog a couple of times over the course of the game. No. That whatever surplus of resources you think you have, I think they could be better spent than on this upgrade. This is maybe more than anything else on Santa's board an auto sell, in my opinion. Finally, let's take a look at, well, I guess first we'll look at his flavor text. All you need to do is believe. And then we'll look at comfort and joy. So this is all sixes, like ults always are. Gain 4 eggnog, deal 10 damage. That's respectable in and of itself. That's actually going to be a net delta of 12 if you fire off the eggnog immediately. Uh, and then immediately target the same opponent with an additional offensive roll phase. So hypothetically, Santa could, on turn 1, kill you. If he ults 5 times, he deals 50 damage, and you never get a chance to take a turn. Now, that's the chances of that happening are like, it's not going to happen. It's like 0. But gosh, that is a scary and dangerous and wild combination of words to have on a character ability. 10 damage and a free turn. Yeah, obviously you take it if you can get it. Your opponent is going to do everything in their power to prevent you from being able to have a whole free turn after doming them for 10, 12 damage with the Nogs, potentially drawing a card and healing too with the 10 damage. I mean, every permutation of this is bad. Not so much because the ult itself is obnoxious, but because the free turn is obnoxious. So let's say you do your 10 damage and then you end up over here on 12 damage with Naughty or Nice. So you essentially just ulted for 22 damage. Ho ho ho. Ho, Merry Christmas, Santa Claus. Yeah, this is a very good ultimate. There's no bad ultimates in Dice Throne. Always, if you have an ult, you always take it. But this is an obnoxious ult. This is a very good ult. Okay, let's take a look at the rest of Santa's cards. So we have Nogtastic, pay 1, gain 5 eggnog. You can immediately spend 3. This is going to let you either heal for 2 with a combat point or a card, or deal 2 damage to an opponent. I like these kinds of cards. This is a card you can play and just kill somebody out of nowhere. I wish there was a little bit more of that in Dice Throne. There's so many heroes that have like little healing here, little damage prevention here. Things like the ninja and her fan of knives, stuff like eggnog being able to just kind of like kill your opponent dead, like in the middle of a turn. Because I can understand how somebody's like, okay, whew, I survived with one health left. After all that damage in your, I'm gonna get one last chance to play, and then you start of your income phase. I'm gonna pay Nogtastic and kill you. That can make somebody feel a little salty. So having having limits on out of combat damage, I would like to see a little bit more of it, but I'm a toxic competitive tryhard player. Uh, so I'm not going to say that it is objectively correct that the game could use more of it, even though I would like to see more of it. Moving on to Ho Ho Ho. So this is just Vegas Baby, but for cheer. At most, you pay 1, you get 3 cheer. You essentially now have a 6-it. So you pay 1 for a 6-it. So this is like a second copy of 6-it in your deck. That's how I would think of this. Um, it's not always going to give you the 6-it, but even if it just gives you the 1 cheer, like it does feel bad if you pay 1 and you get 1 cheer. But that's part of his engine. The Dice Throne is on some level a game where you have to accept that there is chance involved and you have to play with what the dice give you. This is a card I would play. I don't think I would ever sell this unless I really, really needed, like if I have twice as wild in my hand and I'm 1 combat point short, okay, maybe ho 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 goes away in that case because I need it. I have an explicit purpose that is demanding I have the funds available to pay for that card during my roll phase. Most of the time in the game, though, I'm not going to be under that kind of pressure. So I think this is a card you play most of the time. I have to have a reason to sell it. Extremely naughty. All right, it was really hard to talk about Naughty or Nice and not mention this card. Uh, I hope you all appreciated the restraint I showed waiting until the talking about the other cards part of the video to get into this. But this, oh man. Okay, I'm gonna go on a little bit of an aside here. I come from a TCG background, and one of the things that I always loved doing in TCGs was building big, crazy combos. In Versus, there was a card that I would play face down into my row as a resource, and then I would use another card to trade a face down resource to my opponent and take one of theirs, and then I would use another card to flip the resource I gave them face up and deal damage to my opponent equal to that card's cost. And it was like this expensive 16 cost card that I would never actually play. It wasn't in the deck for me to play it, it was in the deck for this ridiculous combo. We don't have a lot of that in Dice Throne. And there's a bunch of reasons why like big elaborate combo plays don't totally map on to Dice Throne in the same way that they do from like a Magic the Gathering or Star Wars Unlimited. They're just different games. But this nonsense, this extremely naughty nonsense, scratches the combo player itch in my brain. So you can only play this card after you have activated Naughty or Nice. And then if your opponent is naughty, the attack becomes undefendable. And the opponent must apologize to you for being naughty or take 2 more damage. So everybody's going to say, I'm sorry, right? Uh, I don't normally talk about this, but I will say when this card was in testing, I would refuse to say sorry. I was like, I'm not naughty. I refuse. I'll take the damage. In a tournament, I would not do that. But playing in any environment where it's not a tournament, I refuse to apologize for being naughty. It's a disingenuous apology. I don't mean it. Uh, Making your naughty attack undefendable, whether it's the upgraded version at what was it, 13 damage, or the base version at the 12 damage, that literally turns it into a second ult. You are essentially coming at them with an ult. The only thing that's different is they could still use evasive or that kind of like damage canceling stuff, and you can't do that with an ult. But in terms of the damage numbers, undefendable. More. This is awesome. This is awesome. Now the problem here is this combo is locked behind multiple layers of variance. One, you have to roll naughty or nice. Two, you have to make sure that your opponent is naughty. If that is an unupgraded naughty or nice, the odds are in their favor. I think you only have a 2/3 chance, or a 1/3 chance, sorry. And if you've upgraded it, well, now it's a 50-50. But still, there's just so many. So there are plenty of games where I have let this card just rot in my hand, waiting for the right chance to play it because I want to play it so bad. I had one game at the shop the other week where I think I rolled naughty or nice on my first roll 4 turns in a row. I didn't have to do anything. It was just, oh, naughty or nice, perfect. Naughty or nice, perfect. And they were never naughty. I had this card in my hand the whole game. It drove me nuts. Um, so we have to acknowledge that if what you're trying to do is win games, if you are playing for stakes in a competitive environment and what you want to do is win games, then the most important thing for you to consider is consistency. And the moment you're sitting there unable to play a card that you need to play, and you could have played it if you would have sold extremely naughty, but because you didn't, you're a combat point short. That's the kind of misplay we have to police ourselves for. And it's really hard because this card is so cool. This card is so fun. It's so fun to play the combo and to have a combo type of feeling available to us in Dice Throne. This is what I want to do like every single game. This is why I love Shadow Thief, because it's a combo character. You have to build, or Artificer is another great example. You have to build up your scaffolding upon which you build your victory. But you've got to get that scaffolding in place. You've got to build the combo before you can execute the combo. Um, Knowing when to sell this card is something I really struggle with because I like what this card wants to do so much. It's a free guard break plus damage. It making your opponent apologize to you. Like just every single thing about this card, I love it from top to bottom. And that's why we have to be extra vigilant with this kind of card to make sure we're selling it when we need to be selling it. Because I've made that mistake. So I'm warning all of you, don't make the same mistake. Don't fall into the trap of being so fixated on, yes, I drew the card oh, that's the other layer of variance. You have to draw this card too. So you have to draw this card, you have to roll the ability, and then you have to roll lucky on the rider die to be able to use it. That is a lot of variance between you and the optimal outcome. And knowing when to cut bait and sell this so you can pay for this twice as wild that you need that's in your hand, that's going to be the difference between winning and losing games in a competitive environment. So I love this card. I love it so much. It's one of at my kitchen table with friends. I will hold on to this card until you can pry it from my cold dead fingertips. And I've lost games because I've tried to force the naughty or nice just so I could get the extremely naughty. In a competitive environment, you can't do that. You cannot do that. So you have to be a lot more willing to let go of this. You have to be a lot more willing to not try to force things. But gosh, do I like this ability. I like it a lot. Gang Deer. One cost attack modifier, roll 5 dice, add 1 damage for each of the axes you get, and then on double bells, gain a cheer. This is very similar to a lot of the other roll 5 attack modifiers that other heroes have. Notably, though, it has the ability to gain cheer if the dice don't go the way you want. Like a lot of times these attack modifiers say stuff like if you added at least 3 damage, get this bonus. Or if 3 of the dice faces are the same, get this bonus. This one allows you to assign damage, or if your dice missed on the damage, you can gain a cheer as like a consolation prize. If I'm playing this, I do not want cheer out of it. I want the damage. But you pretty much always play these. I don't think I've run into one of these pay one, roll five, add damage cards that I've recommended selling. I think you play these every game. Rudolph. Pay one, add 1 damage per cheer. This is another combo card. This is another card that requires setup. You got to get the cheer. You got to get the 3 cheer on there to do the 3 damage. I think pay one for 1 damage is not good enough unless it's like the difference between you and lethal. Sure, then in that case you do it. Otherwise, I think you want a minimum of 2. And I don't know that I've ever played this and not gotten the full 3. But acknowledging my bias as a player, I tend to try to stack cheer anyway. Like my proclivity is to try to always use cheer to spend for the 6-it rather than for the reroll attempt. So I am more likely to have cheer stacks on my board, and I feel like that's led to me always being able to spend this in moments where I get 3 damage out of it. And 1 combat point for 3 damage feels great. Like that's good. This is another card you just play. Santa's Helper. Discard 5 eggnog. So you have to be at a full eggnog stack to be able to play this card. Heal 2. Draw a card. Gain a cheer. And deal 2 damage as an isolated source of undefendable damage. It's awesome. But like all combos, it's going to be only as good as your ability to set it up is. So in games where your opponent is ripping your status effects off of you, or the dice just aren't giving you abilities to generate eggnog, this is a card kind of like extremely naughty, where you want to use it. Like this is a great set of abilities. You essentially doing 4 damage spread, drawing a card, gaining a cheer. Like that's all good stuff. But if you can't get to the 5 eggnog and you're just sitting on this card while it rots in your hand, turn it into a combat point and use that combat point to win the game. Don't get fixated on combos. I get it. It's Dice Throne. We don't have a lot of combos. So seeing these cool combo cards where you have to set things up and then you get a payoff, I want to do it too. It is fun. But in a competitive environment, if you're bringing Santa Claus, you either sell. I would strongly encourage you to either sell this almost immediately or use it immediately if you happen to draw it when the setup conditions were already in place. I don't think this is a card you draw and then spend a lot of time trying to set it up to pull it off. I think that's a trap. That's a waste of your mental energy. That's a waste of your time. If the stars align and you can play this card basically as soon as you get it because you already happen to have the 5 nogs, great. Maybe if you're not under a ton of pressure, you can sit on it for a few turns and see if organically the game gives you the nog that you need to pull this off, that's fine. But if this is like in your opening hand and you spend your first 3 turns of the game trying to push towards getting Santa's helper to fire, I think that's a recipe for losing that game. So kind of falls into a similar bucket as the extremely naughty card, only the bait is less tempting. Both could be a trap, but the bait is less tempting here. White Elephant Gift. 0 cost. Conceal a cheer, 3 eggnog in one hand, and nothing in the other. The opponent chooses a hand. If they choose the empty hand, you keep the contents of the other, otherwise nothing happens. So this is a 0 cost card to potentially get a bunch of resources, or potentially get nothing. I have sold this card. Depending upon the texture of the board, what my opponent's health total is at, what other cards I have in my hand, there are times where I will take 1 guaranteed combat point over the chance of 3 eggnog and a cheer. 3 eggnog and a cheer is pretty tempting bait though. So there's a theme here with Santa Claus where he has these cards that you want to sit on and look for like optimal conditions. Like you want to play white elephant because there's a chance that they're going to tap my left hand and I'm going to flip it over and there's nothing in it and my right hand is full of goodies. There's also a chance that you just sold a card for no combat points. Um, I'm not crazy about this one. It's a 50-50 to it's one thing if what you're doing is it's a 50-50 to like get something. Like, okay, I could get nothing or I could get something. This is less than nothing. You are selling a card for 0 combat points for a chance at something. So if they pick the hand with the goodies in it, you get essentially less than nothing. You paid 1 combat point for no reason. I no, no. Kitchen table all day long. Talk some trash to your buddies. Hey, which hand is it? There could be a fun mind game here. In a competitive environment where I need consistency and I need concrete results, this is a card I find myself selling most of the time. Lastly, Rebel Without a Clause. This is Santa's promo card. Now, in most competitive events, promo cards aren't allowed, but this video series is where I'm talking about the card, so I'm going to briefly touch on it here. Roll 1 on a 6, you get 2 cheer and 4 eggnog. On any other outcome, draw a card. For me, these are always just draw a card. I roll, I don't get a 6, I draw the card. But if you do get the 6, yeah, this is fine. Getting 2 cheer, 4 eggnog, that's great. I'm not sure why it doesn't max his stacks. I feel like that could have been stack maxable there, and that would have been fine, but promo cards are for funsies anyway. Okay, parting thoughts on Santa Claus. So, if you are playing as Santa Claus, I think it is optimal to put everything you have into not just hitting naughty or nice, but hitting naughty or nice consistently over turns. If I can do something where I spend 1 card to get a second 6 and I go with festivities, or I have to spend a couple of cards to get myself into the naughty or nice, in that case, I'll take the festivities on that roll. You want to be economical and efficient in how you spend your cards because he has surprisingly awkward role objectives. While they do kind of flow into each other, they don't naturally. Moon Elf is the example you can go to where you upgrade the Moon Elf's board and all of a sudden they can't whiff anymore. Now, not all the powers are fantastic, but it's a very safe character to play with. There's kind of always something available for them to do. Santa can whiff, and he wants you to chase 6s for festivities, naughty or nice, sometimes is straights, and of course everybody likes 6s on ultimates. Um, so he's got this sort of pressure set up, and it's alleviated a little bit with cheer and the fact that most of his upgrades you can probably trade those into combat points to pay for your dice fix cards. But having consistent attacks, like I do not want to use all the resources I have in my hand to make sure I get a naughty or nice this turn when I could have just settled on a fireside chat this turn for no resources and then I still have something to do next turn. So with Santa, kind of more than a lot of other, and he is an aggressively slanted hero. You want to get in there and pick the biggest damage number that your dice will let you pick every single turn for the most part. Uh, but more than other aggressive heroes, Santa has this like underlying current of thinking about your next turn and managing your resources, where somebody like Pyro or Barbarian are a little bit more just like all to the wall, super hyper aggressive, and there's not this underlying resource management issue that needs to take place. I think it's a cool variation on a way to do an aggressive hero. I do really enjoy playing Santa, but one thing I struggle with when I play Santa, and that comes down to counterplay. If somebody has seen Santa do his thing, they know what to look out for. It's very easy. If you're playing against Santa, I like to save my dice manipulation cards for the moments when my opponent has to use all three rolls. For the moments when my opponent has a very an empty or a very low grip. Because once Santa is down to just a couple of cards, and he doesn't have the best economy, like Eggnog is a little bit of economy. Some of his abilities will let him draw cards here and there. But if the game starts to go long, he's going to start to gas out. And all you need to do is know when to deploy that tippet to push him off of naughty or nice into nothing or a small straight. So this is a hero whose counterplay strategy, you get really rewarded when you use your dice fixers to nuke Santa's rolls more than trying to push extra damage yourself. Because his defense doesn't really do anything in terms of blocking damage or healing, you can pretty reliably, even a character who has slightly below average damage numbers printed on their board, they're going to feel stronger than they would against somebody who's like stopping damage or healing every time you attack them. You can kind of hit Santa with more consistent streams of damage than a lot of other heroes, and that really just comes down to the way his defense works. Now, he does mitigate that with his Nog and with his healing. So as you're pouring those consistent damage numbers into Santa's defense, you do need to think about cards like what status effects can be a huge blowout against Santa. If you time it right and you take away a full stack of cheer, a couple of Nogs like right before that turn where he was going to spend the cheer to get the six he needed, naughty or nice, and use a tippet to force the naughty roll and play extremely like the combo nature of Santa is disruptible. Kind of the way I think about a large straight as being a very disruptible role, Santa's entire game plan kind of presents in that same way, where you know what he's going for, and you just need to know where to push. Just poke right here and take away that six off of his naughty or nice. And if you can force like one whiff, or well, if you force a whiff on just about any hero, that can be GG. But I feel like Santa, as a combination between how combo oriented some of his best abilities are and how he struggles at mitigating and preventing damage, if you can topple the combo before he pulls it off, even just once, and you see your opponent kind of like pushing for that naughty or nice and telegraphing the extremely naughty, if you can just keep pushing them off of that, they can kind of end up spinning their wheels a little bit. So to kind of summarize Santa's counterplay, I would strongly advise using your dice fix cards aggressively and attacking Santa, especially in those moments. You know when your opponent's vulnerable. When they're looking at roll two, like, oh man, what do I do? And they roll three, and oh, okay, I'm going to present for this. Those moments where somebody looks really relieved to get the result they wanted on roll three, that's where you push Santa. That's where you sow wild. That's where you helping hand. That's where you tip it. And often the result you're going to hear is, I guess I whiff then. If they have three cheer on their board, that's not the time to tip their six. You know what I mean? So you have to time your disruption appropriate to what Santa is presenting you. But if you do that, you can have some success against this character. He is very much an aggro type hero with these elements of some kind of combo-y stuff thrown in there. So all in all, I really like Santa, but this is a hero I've had a ton of fun with, and just this doesn't have anything to do with gameplay. But holy smokes, do those metal dice sound amazing when you throw them in the dice tray. It's just boom, boom, boom. The thunking, oh, it's great. It's great. This has been the Build Phase review and analysis for the Dice Throne hero, Santa Claus. I'm Mr. Ben, and you should go win some games.